Welcome friends. This is a new initiative by Crypto Varsity on Crypto TV. So on this particular series of episodes, we're actually going to demystify what is called the blockchain technology as well as the cryptocurrencies markets. We've actually seen the emergence of Bitcoin as well as various other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum as well as Ripple, and you've got basically n number of cryptocurrencies and coins and tokens and whatnot on this particular unique technology which is called the blockchain technology. When you go to a layman and then you explain to him that this particular blockchain technology actually comprises of what you call a peer-to-peer mechanism, whereby basically there is not going to be any intermediary when you're actually going to make any payment. It is based on what is called a decentralized and a distributed network of computers, which is actually going to perform the transactions and store all the transaction history. There is a huge part of the population in the world which actually is quite skeptical as far as the blockchain technology as well as cryptocurrencies are concerned. Now, why exactly is there so much concern about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology? Well, now, what exactly is the blockchain technology? To what extent is it possible to have security as far as the blockchain transactions are concerned? So in this particular episode, we are actually going to demystify the blockchain technology as well as cryptocurrencies, and to a great extent, we are also going to see to what extent it has actually evolved over the last several decades and millennia. What are the different financial technologies innovations which have come across, which have actually happened, and subsequently we'll also take a look at to the extent to which Bitcoins as well as the blockchain technology has actually impacted the lives of people. Now, this particular technology is here to stay, and in order to gain confidence as far as this particular technology is concerned, it is important for us to understand what exactly is the technology all about. What exactly goes into building this particular blockchain technology? I mean, what exactly is this particular cryptocurrencies, and how exactly is it actually designed to work on the blockchain technology on a peer-to-peer mechanism with a distributed architecture, and what exactly are the benefits which we can derive from this? Is it possible for you to have complete security risk? You must have heard of hacking as well as theft of cryptocurrency coins. Now, all this kind of information which actually gives a lot of concern for the layman investor. So these are some of the bottlenecks which we want to clarify about, and we want to actually elaborate to what extent cryptocurrencies as well as blockchain technology can actually help various corporate as well as various industries in the development of secure transactions to increase the extent of security risk as far as the transactions are concerned. Before going into the blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, what we will do is we will look at what are the different innovations which have happened in the financial industry over the last several millennia. In fact, since time immemorial, we have seen transactions typically occurred as a barter, whereby one good was exchanged for another. In fact, even the emergence of gold as well as metal coins and paper currencies in order to replace the barter as a store of value basically is nothing but basically a financial technology innovation. It's basically an innovation and a disruption which has occurred over several millennia altogether, over the last several hundred years. We have also seen more recently in 1950s, 1960s, we had the emergence of ATMs all around the world, and this has actually replaced branch banking. So typically now you don't find too many people going to the banks. They actually go to the ATM in order to withdraw cash as well as deposit cash also. So you have plastic money which has actually replaced the physical money, and you got also the emergence of digital currencies, digital payment wallets, which have actually facilitated transactions to a great extent. So it's become extremely easy for people to actually perform the transactions. Now, in this particular context, around 11 years back, it so happened that there was actually an emergence of the blockchain technology, which has actually created ripples all around the world. Now, some of the innovation waves which have happened, other than basically, the ATMs, it also includes basically digital payment channels, as I had mentioned. We also have technology innovations in terms of robo-advisors actually providing investment advisory on an automated basis. You've got private banking as well as wealth management being managed using robo-advisors. We have got actually automated solutions using artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques using what you call big data, which has actually created ripples all around the world in terms of financial technology innovation is concerned. So we have got a huge emergence of fintech innovations which have occurred over the last several decades. Now, this particular innovation is actually given rise to also capital raising in the form of basically initial coin offerings as well as peer-to-peer lending. Now, what do you mean by all this? Basically, we have actually seen a drastic change in the way in which finance has actually evolved over the last several decades. And it's become more easy for you to actually do online transactions thanks majorly to the basically access of mobile internet connectivity to the far reaches, even to the rural areas. And this has actually increased to a great extent the economies of the world. The e-commerce has actually increased to a great extent because of the increase in availability of internet as well as mobile connectivity. So who is exactly responsible for these kinds of technologies? Now, since the last several decades, we would see actually the financial companies, finance industry per se, including the hedge funds as well as asset management companies and to a great extent banks, basically being at the forefront of instituting a lot of fintech innovations. But then more recently, in the last decade and a half, there has been a substantial shift in the way in which the industry is actually performed and who's actually introducing the innovations. We would be able to see Google, Facebook, as well as Apple introducing major substantial innovations in the last decade and a half, which has actually revolutionized the way in which even payments are done. To a great extent, basically, you can see the IT companies, the tech companies, so to speak. So basically, like, they're actually at the forefront of fintech innovation. So this is thanks to basically their risk-savvy nature. Their risk appetite is much higher. It's possible for them to even get into a peer-to-peer lending. And one of the other offshoots is that they have lesser regulatory oversight in terms of the tech industry is concerned. So they've actually facilitated to a great extent an ease as far as the transactions are concerned. So this has actually made it more easy for the common man to actually go and raise funds. At the click of a button, it's possible for you to actually take a loan instantaneously. So these are the various benefits of actually the innovations which have happened over the last several decades, and specifically in the last decade and a half by the tech companies, so to speak. So having seen basically the emergence of the fintech revolution, let us get back into basically this particular context of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. Now, cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies, in fact, something which a layman, as I mentioned, basically will not be able to digest. Why? Because it means that the asset value is actually in the form of ones and zeros stored in the computers across the world, and there is no specific backing by any particular central bank or a regulator, so to speak. So in other words, how is it possible for a layman or a common man to actually go ahead and basically have his own assets in the form of ones and zeros stored in the computers, and for you to have an access to basically the funds? Now, what exactly is the benefit of undertaking this blockchain technology into your business environment? How exactly blockchain technology has assisted and aided the cryptocurrencies as well as the transactions to be performed to a great extent? And first of all, let us understand what is a blockchain in the first place. See, to a great extent, blockchain is nothing but basically a database. It's nothing but a database which stores data in the forms of ones and zeros across a wide variety of network of computers called nodes. So because it is actually stored in thousands of nodes or computers across the internet, it is actually called what is called a distributed database. So this particular architecture of blockchain is actually a distributed and decentralized. When I'm talking of the word distributed, it's because the data is actually stored across a wide network of computers called nodes, and you also have got a decentralization in terms of the validations and verifications of the data. Now, what do I mean by basically this validations and verifications of data? Now, this particular data is actually stored in all these computers. Now, what if some hacker or some XYZ node actually alters the data and basically it actually comes and affects the entire transaction history? Now, is it possible for the data to be manipulated and data to be changed and for the entire network to be fooled by basically any particular node or any hacker? Now, this is precisely where the blockchain technology has actually become a major innovation in the last few years. Now, this particular innovation started way back in 2009 when there was a white paper written on blockchain. And this particular paper, incidentally, basically it revolutionized the way in which it solved what is called a consensus algorithm. Now, what do you mean by this consensus algorithm? Now, just imagine, suppose this data is actually stored across so many nodes, so many computers, and all these computers need to actually have a consensus. It's actually a dance with democracy, so to speak. Why do you call it a dance with democracy? Because it's a simple majority, or more than 50% of the nodes or computers on the network have to agree that this particular data which is actually stored, a transaction history which is stored, is actually a genuine transaction. So in other words, you have what is called a consensus algorithm which is inbuilt across all these nodes. It is possible for any particular node to actually verify whether the transaction is actually genuine or not. In case there is even a minor change of even an addition or a subtraction of a bit data size of information, it is possible for the entire nodes to invalidate the entire data. Possible for all the nodes to actually disagree and invalidate any particular spurious transaction or manipulation which has occurred as far as the computers are concerned. So in other words, you have actually a foolproof system which will ensure that at least 50% plus or 51% of the nodes have to actually agree that this particular transaction is actually a valid transaction. This is what you refer to as a consensus algorithm. Now, we've actually come across this particular technique to a great extent across many applications, but the thing is that this is the first time it has actually been put into practice. Now, why is it actually being put into practice? It's been put into practice because this is precisely how the data is actually stored across a wide variety of nodes and computers, and it is also validated transaction history which has actually taken place. So the distributed and decentralized architecture as well as the consensus algorithm forms the foundation as far as the entire blockchain technology is concerned. Now, how is exactly this consensus algorithm, and basically how is the consensus among various nodes, at least 50% of the nodes, or 50, you call it the 51% consensus algorithm. So how is it actually put into practice and how is it implemented? So this is precisely what we are going to see in the next few slides. So this consensus algorithm is a very unique kind of a concept whereby even if you've got say a 1 GB or a 2 GB data or say a 5 MB data or a 10 MB transaction size data, now this particular data is actually going to be hashed. You basically use an algorithm called a hash function. Incidentally, Bitcoin uses what is called a SHA-256 algorithm. Now this particular algorithm does the number crunching using a series of zeros and ones using bitwise operators, and it actually hashes or basically compresses this entire data into just 256 bits. Now this particular size of 256 bits is actually stored, the data is actually stored in a hexadecimal format, and this particular data is actually, in fact, it's an encrypted format, and it is not possible for anybody to actually change the data. So once basically the transactions are actually encrypted and stored in a blockchain, as the block is validated and it's stored in the blockchain, it is possible for basically only that particular block of data to be validated in future. Nobody can actually change the data and basically manipulate the data in such a way that it is possible for them to actually achieve or basically insert any new transaction into the system. But once the transaction is stored, it is not possible for you to change that particular transaction data also. So it becomes very robust as well as a foolproof mechanism which will ensure that it is not possible for anybody to actually manipulate the data, so to speak. If anybody tries to manipulate the data, it is possible for all the other nodes to actually invalidate the data and to basically throw the data out of the network. So basically the particular data which has actually been manipulated will not be accepted by all the nodes, because it knows very well that there has actually been a change as far as the data is concerned, because this particular algorithm, the hash function, will ensure that it is actually protecting the extent to which the encryption of data is done. So this particular concept is what you refer to as the avalanche effect. That is, even if one bit of the 256 bits are changed, then it is possible that basically the final output across all the nodes will actually go for a toss, and it's actually going to be a garbled message. It will not be accepted by all the other nodes, and it is actually going to be invalidated by all the nodes. So this is precisely where you have actually a consensus built across all the nodes in the system. At least 51% of the nodes have to actually provide the final verification and validation of the data. As far as, say, for example, if you made a transaction and then it is sitting in the system across all the nodes, then this particular transaction is stored in an encrypted format, and it is not possible for you to actually manipulate this particular transaction, so to speak, so that at least all the 51% actually will not be able to agree that this particular transaction is genuine one. So this is precisely why you have the concept of what is called a data immutability. So in this data immutability, it basically refers to the fact that it is not possible for you to actually change the data and have it accepted across all these nodes. So this is precisely one of the major benefits as far as the blockchain technology is concerned. So what we have seen is, what is a blockchain? It basically consists of a series of blocks of data. It is nothing but zeros and ones stored across a series of nodes, series of computers in the internet, and all these blocks are actually in fact stored in an encrypted format. There is a consensus algorithm across all these nodes, and this consensus algorithm is actually based on what is called a hash function. You've got various types of consensus algorithms which are there. The one which is most prevalent is actually what we call the SHA-256, which is used by the Bitcoin blockchain. And this particular consensus algorithm will ensure that there is actually a data immutability, in the sense that the particular data which is stored, it cannot be manipulated. If it is manipulated, it will be easily identified by majority of the nodes. So this is precisely the benefit of a blockchain technology, and where you say the data is immutable. Now, let us go to the next part of our discussion. How exactly is the new cryptocurrency coins actually formed? Now, this particular concept is what is called a cryptocurrency mining. So, suppose you want to have a transaction between A and B. You've got this particular transaction happening through the blockchain network. The cryptocurrencies, for example, suppose a person A is sitting in one particular country and he's sending bitcoins to another person B in another country, and you got the particular bitcoins actually transferred from A's account to B's account. It is possible for you to actually transfer the bitcoins without any intermediary in between. So this is what you refer to as a peer-to-peer connectivity and a peer-to-peer transaction. But then once this transaction is done, in order to validate the transaction, you got what you called miners in the cryptocurrency market. So basically you got actually in the blockchain, you have specific nodes or computers which have got immense computation power, which will use their computation power in order to solve a riddle, a puzzle. So this particular puzzle is actually solved in order to basically, do a number crunching. It is done by what you call a brute force method. You got actually the hash functions, which are actually, basically by trial and error method. They typically use what are called high computation power ASIC chips or application specific integrated circuits. And subsequently they use what is called the proof of work concept. So in the proof of work concept, you actually use a trial and error method in order to solve any particular riddle or a puzzle, and basically which is actually set by the particular blockchain. Like for example, in the case of bitcoins, you have to actually solve a puzzle whereby it is possible for you to see that you got to basically insert, basically after the particular hash function, you got to insert a random numbers in order to basically solve for it. Say basically it has to be prefixed, the particular hash function output has to be prefixed by a series of zeros. So this particular concept actually ensures that there is actually sufficient security as far as basically the transaction history is concerned. And on top of that, you got actually miners who are actually awarded, who actually try to do the number crunching through a trial and error method, and basically they actually do it by a brute force method in order to basically solve this particular riddle. So once you actually solve this particular riddle, it is possible for you to actually be rewarded for the particular effort which you're taking. Now this particular concept of mining or cryptocurrency mining is an energy intensive process. In this energy intensive process, you consume a lot of power. You got to actually deploy a huge infrastructure. So when you're actually deploying the infrastructure, you're going to incur costs. So why would any particular cryptocurrency miner do it free of cost? It's not possible for any cryptocurrency miner not to be rewarded, or basically he's actually incurring costs, and it is necessary for him to actually be rewarded in terms of basically like any kind of incentives which are there in the cryptocurrency market or in the blockchain itself. So the cryptocurrency miners, incidentally, they're actually awarded coins for solving every block. For example, the Bitcoin block, as of now, you'll be awarded close to around 6.25 Bitcoins for every block which has been solved by the cryptocurrency miner. And this particular riddle, which I said basically has to be solved. On top of that, each and every transaction which is processed, a particular fee has to be paid to the cryptocurrency miner. So the miner, incidentally, basically when he's actually going to do the number crunching, when he's going to validate each and every transaction, and he's going to generate a block filled with all transactions which have happened between, for example, this A transferring the bitcoins to B, it is possible for him to actually earn the bitcoins in order to compensate for the amount of effort, time, as well as energy which is actually consumed and for which he is actually incurring costs. So this particular concept is what you refer to as a proof of work concept, on which as of now Bitcoin as well as even Ethereum is on. But then it actually takes up a huge power consumption. It's very energy intensive, so it leaves a huge carbon footprint. So lately, in fact, even China has actually banned the mining of bitcoins. So you got actually a lot of concern in terms of huge power consumption occurring because of the cryptocurrency mining. So gradually the market is actually shifting to a new kind of a concept, new kind of a methodology, which is called the proof of stake. In a proof of stake, typically basically like you're actually like, change the way in which you're actually validating the transactions. You're validating the transaction using in the proof of stake methodology based on basically the amount of extent of assets which are actually held by the particular node. So for example, if a particular node has got, say, for example, close to around 2000 bitcoins or 2000 ethers, so basically like, it's based on basically, suppose it has got, say, close to 5% of the ethers, then it actually gets preference at the time of basically being allocated the block for solving the block. So you got actually a huge change in the way in which the cryptocurrency mining is going to happen, and it's actually going to revolutionize once again the cryptocurrency markets as well as the cryptocurrency, the blockchain industry, which also lowers the carbon footprint to a great extent. What are the other advances on top of basically the blockchain technology as well as the cryptocurrencies? So cryptocurrencies initially, they were actually in fact launched as series of coins. There were initial coin offerings, and subsequently you had a lot of coins in the market. Now once the blockchain technology actually developed to a great extent, you have what you call smart contracts. The smart contracts are nothing but application logic, or basically, it's basically conditional statements, an if then else statement, which is incidentally inserted on top of the blockchain technology. This if then else statement, basically it's, for example, let me give an example of a smart contract. So you got, for example, A, which has to transfer funds to B using this particular blockchain or the cryptocurrency. So there will be a conditional statement saying that after 3 days, A has to transfer the funds to B. So this particular if then else statement becomes basically a part of a smart contract or an application logic, and it is actually stored in the blockchain itself. So the smart contract, once it's generated, you cannot actually change the particular smart contract. Application logic, once it's set, it becomes sacrosanct. It becomes a part of the blockchain, which becomes, as I had mentioned to you, data immutable. So in other words, you got actually a very, very interesting phenomenon, which over here basically, which the industry is actually using slowly. It is actually trying to get basically the smart contracts technology onto the blockchain network. So onto the blockchain technology, smart contracts enable you to basically provide an application logic onto the blockchain itself, so that basically you can actually give conditional statements for execution of the cryptocurrencies. So it's one step ahead of basically the the typical cryptocurrency. So you got on the one extreme basically a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which is in other words just a passive kind of a transaction history. It stores basically transaction history. But then on the other hand, you got actually Ether and various other new cryptocurrencies which have come, which also support what you call the smart contracts, which are nothing but basically conditional statements which will execute basically the instructions which are set and which is stored in the blockchain itself. So this particular smart contracts sees a huge utility in terms of basically the extent to which you can actually perform transactions using blockchain, which is a secure technology in terms of decentralized as well as distributed network, which requires consensus algorithm for all the nodes to actually agree upon as far as the transactions are concerned or the data is concerned. Next, on top of this, you got also what are called decentralized applications. This decentralized applications, instantly, basically, it's an umbrella framework. In this umbrella framework, it basically provides you a user interface whereby it is possible for you to have a series of smart contracts which will enable you to have basically kind of a control over basically the execution which happens on the cryptocurrencies. So typically you got actually a huge impact because of these new technologies like smart contracts as well as the decentralized applications, which will enable you to have basically a total control in terms of basically what are the transactions which are actually going to take place. So in other words, you got actually a lot of advancement in technology, and it's actually become more sophisticated. Rather than having plain vanilla transaction history being recorded, you got actually application logic with if then else statements as well as conditional statements, so to speak, basically embedded in the blockchain technology, and which also cannot be manipulated, and basically which is also validated and verified using the consensus algorithm. So in other words, you got actually a huge impact because of the smart contracts as well as the decentralized applications which have come about in the last few years. And this is set to basically revolutionize the way in which business is done across not only corporate as well as various banks, financial institutions, in order to basically ensure that there's a higher level of security. At the same time, there's decentralization as far as the validation is concerned of data. So let us go to the next major innovation which has happened, which is actually what you call tokenization of assets. In this particular context, it is possible for you to have even an illiquid asset, say like an infrastructure or a real estate or a particular utility service, to be broken down into basically a series of tokens. Tokens are nothing but basically it's built on top of a cryptocurrency and that particular blockchain technology. So this particular tokens can actually be issued out into the market. It can be traded on cryptocurrency exchanges. So you got actually a huge emergence of this particular concept in the form of basically what you call, say, even non-fungible tokens. You might have heard of NFTs actually being basically like sold in the markets. So NFTs will ensure that these are non-fungible tokens, whereby it is possible for you to actually buy or sell the non-fungible tokens, but then it is not possible for you to, basically like duplicate them. It is possible for you to even say basically put a value for an image or a photograph, and subsequently you can sell it out into the, in the cryptocurrency, as a blockchain through the tokens. So it is possible for you to actually have a lot of benefit out of having the cryptocurrency tokens. In this particular context, you got actually a lot of liquidity, which is actually in fact built on top of basically illiquid assets when you're actually going to tokenize those assets as well as services. Let me give you an example. Suppose you got, say for example, a particular company which is providing you the transport services. So all its customers instantly basically like they might be actually, basically like using payment wallets in order to basically transfer cash, and they will typically make payments using the cash. But then this particular company can also launch tokens or coins. In other words, basically it is possible for them to actually launch a service whereby it is possible for them to sell the tokens, and it is also possible for them to actually manage their customer service using tokens itself. And these tokens also can be hosted on cryptocurrency exchanges. So in other words, suppose you got basically tokens of Ola Money, and basically like you want to transfer it to say Amazon or a Uber coin. So it is possible for you to actually transfer from one particular service provider to another particular service provider using basically a cryptocurrency exchange. I've just given you a hypothetical example as of now, but then basically like this is precisely how you can actually implement the tokenization of assets. It's even possible for you to make illiquid assets liquid using tokens, cryptocurrency tokens. So having seen basically like what exactly are cryptocurrencies, coins, as well as the blockchain technology, how it works, we've also come across a more sophisticated version of the blockchain technology, which uses the blockchain technology, which is the smart contracts. And we've also seen what are decentralized applications. We also touch based on the tokenization of assets, whereby instead of coins, you also have tokens which are built on top of the cryptocurrency coins as well as the blockchain itself. So let us actually go ahead and let us take a look at what exactly are the central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, are the latest innovation as far as the cryptocurrency market and the blockchain technology is concerned. Now, as and when last decade, we have seen actually the emergence of cryptocurrencies in the market. There has been a gradual concern among all the policymakers, governments, as well as the central banks as to what exactly would be the impact as far as the cryptocurrencies are concerned on their local sovereign currencies. So in this context, a lot of central banks, what they've done is that they've actually started introducing stricter policy as well as regulatory oversight on the cryptocurrency markets in their respective jurisdictions. So you have actually a huge emergence of the concept of the central bank digital currencies, which are nothing but basically cryptocurrencies which are launched by the respective central banks itself. Now, this becomes very important because the central banks are concerned that suppose cryptocurrencies are allowed to be freely traded in their economies, there might be a lot of investor interest, and it can also impact the value of their own local sovereign currencies. So in this particular context, it is very important for them to actually analyze and understand what is the impact of cryptocurrencies on their own monetary as well as fiscal policies, and how exactly it's going to impact their economies. So the central banks, in other words, basically they have started doing a huge research and analysis on how exactly they can introduce the central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The CBDC can be introduced in order to basically ensure that it actually acts as a payment channel. From around 11 years back, when Bitcoin was introduced in the market, it was primarily introduced as basically a kind of a payment channel, whereby it is possible for anybody to actually make payment. So A makes payment to B through a peer-to-peer connectivity, and there is no intermediary in between. But then gradually Bitcoin as well as various other cryptocurrencies have actually gained acceptance as an investment asset. So once they've gained acceptance as an investment asset, you find a lot of retail and institutional investors actively going and participating in the private cryptocurrencies market. So this private cryptocurrencies market has actually spawned a huge impact on basically, it's become basically more than $1 trillion industry, and basically it has actually attracted funds from various other asset classes such as commodities, equities, as well as fixed income securities. So you got a lot of major banks, large financial institutions, as well as corporate, and you got also a lot of retail interest in basically the using cryptocurrencies for investment purpose. So when you have actually the emergence of a particular asset class, a new asset class in the last decade, this is actually set off alarm bells among central banks in the world. So all the central banks have started basically analyzing how exactly the CBDCs can actually be introduced in order to counter the cryptocurrencies, or to rather coexist with the cryptocurrencies. Now, what is the use of a CBDC? Now, CBDC actually typically, there are a lot of advantages as far as central bank digital currencies are concerned. One of the major advantages is that it can actually replace the physical currency in the local jurisdiction itself. And more importantly, central banks will have complete control over basically the CBDCs itself. So central banks can have access to real-time data as far as CBDC transactions. They'll be able to see basically on the specific CBDC's blockchain what exactly the transactions which are occurring as far as the a particular central bank digital currency is concerned. So it is possible for them to actually get real-time data. They can use big data as well as artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics in order to understand what exactly is the flow of money, what are the transactions which have been performed, and at the same time, they can even make it possible for any particular investor to buy private cryptocurrencies using the CBDC itself. So this will actually provide the central bank greater control as well, of its own monetary policy as well as fiscal policy, and at the same time, it can allow investors to actually take advantage of cryptocurrencies as a market for diversifying the portfolio risk. So to a great extent, we will see actually the emergence of CBDCs over the next 2-3 years to 5 years. Basically, we will see a gradual acceptance of CBDCs as a mode of payment in various countries. So CBDCs, one of the other major benefits of CBDCs is that it can actually replace physical currencies. Physical currencies, actually you incur a cost in terms of distribution as well as printing of paper money. So instead of that, it is possible for you to actually replace the paper money as well as physical currency using the CBDCs itself. So what we are going to see is a massive emergence of a new kind of asset which will actually be able to replace physical currency itself maybe in a few years' time. And we will also see basically central banks adopting this particular technology, the blockchain technology itself, for ensuring that it is able to keep track of the flow of transactions, including cross-border transactions. Over the last few minutes, we've actually been through basically what exactly are the fintech innovations, who's spearheading the fintech innovations, and we also touch based on what are cryptocurrencies and blockchain. What is blockchain technology? How is the blockchain technology used for peer-to-peer connectivity, and basically the transactions are performed without any intermediaries in this P2P network? How is consensus algorithm used for basically validating and verifying transactions? What is the use of hash functions? And finally, we've also seen the emergence of CBDCs, as well as before that, we've also seen basically how exactly smart contracts as well as tokens and distributed applications have gradually transformed the blockchain industry, blockchain technology industry, as well as the cryptocurrencies markets. As we proceed on, we will be coming out with a few more episodes whereby we'll go in depth as far as basically the extent of various technologies which are involved in the cryptocurrency markets as well as the blockchain technology, and we'll go into the nitty-gritty of the smart contracts, distributed applications, as well as the CBDCs itself. So thank you very much.